Sono Miya Masaoka e sono compositrice, suono artista e musicista. Vivo a Roma because I have the Rome Prize right now, and so I'm at the Accademia Americana of Rome, and normally I live in New York City. So I've been in Rome since September, and I've learned so much about the history of different kinds of art making in the Rinascimento, and the ideas of what is space and three-dimensionality, and very interested in De La Francesca, the artist who was credited for creating a kind of three-dimensional space, because I'm interested in sound, of course, as a sound artist and composer, and sound, the foreground, the midground, and the background are things that I consider when creating a piece. And so it's very interesting to think about how they began to invent this idea of space, because it's actually an invention. And we speak of space now, and it's really a contemporary idea of what we think of as space. So it's enlightened me so much of reconsidering my assumptions of sound and space and how we inhabit space, what is social space, and this term that means so much and yet nothing. Well, it's my musical life has really spanned decades. And I've been very much influenced by Gagaku music. I had a Gagaku ensemble, which is Japanese ancient court music. And we had our teacher, Togi Suenobu, and Gagaku goes to the Tang Dynasty, and it's very interesting because it has a different concept of space and time. And the temporality of the orchestra or the group breathes together, and there's a sense of silence and space and how time is perceived by the listener and also the players. So it's a very different sense of time that people had 1,000 years ago, of course, than we have now. But there's something also that we can relate to is contemporary people now. Yes, I've composed pieces for wavefield synthesis for more than 300 speakers, different ways of conceiving space within an architectural framework. And there's the reflections and deflections of sound against resonant surfaces, whether it's an architectural building or even resonant surfaces in a valley and natural earth, making amplification from the valley, for example. So or the Colosseums in Italy are very much amplification naturally of the acoustics. And so all these things are very relevant towards thinking about sound and how it can be patterned. Sound can be patterned, and the proportion of this kind of sound to that kind of sound and this organization of sound is really the basics for composition. Well, I'm interested in the imaginary space because that's what I think the future is. And I think if we think of a future that doesn't have totalitarian systems or different kinds of human dictatorships or racist systems that are not healthy for the plants or for ecology, we have to have an imaginary space first before we can change anything. We have to imagine it first, and that's why the imagination is so important. And this imaginary sound space, I think, is a place to start, because that's where we can kind of leave our daily troubles and go into another world, because that's for me is something very important as artists. Yes, I've been working with the biological and physiological responsive plants in the early 90s, and it's always been for me very important what is our relationship to the Anthropocene, but to our environment. And the plants are actually have a very sophisticated response towards people, and also the root systems also respond, and they make sounds as they're slowly growing. So this is always something that's very interesting, and I continue to do this kind of research, installations, and different kinds of pieces. They're inspired also by the ideas of a network of root systems. Well, I think the change is coming very slowly and very late for me. I spent, but I think it's good that things are finally slowly starting to change, and otherwise we will die as a civilization. So it's really important that we begin to address these inequities in society and really start to think of an imaginary future where we can really have these kinds of transformations.